All right, welcome to another edition of Riding Home. The season may be in an off week, but we are not. Dean Legge, Matt DeBerry, Ryan Curley, and as we get ready for Jacksonville in a couple of weeks, there's been a lot of discussion about a lot of different things. Actually, the Vols, how well they played against Alabama. This rivalry game with the Gators. But Matt, your Phillies really. Would you rather talk about the Eagles?
No. I mean, I hate the Phillies, hate the Eagles. What's been weird though is that Florida is not this weekend, of course, but next weekend. But I'm trying to remember a time where we, I say we, maybe the media or the team or just the fans in general, overlooking Florida to someone else. Usually it's to Kentucky. A couple of years, the East has been on the line with Georgia, Kentucky at the end of the year. A lot of years it's Auburn, but rarely, or if ever, have we kind of looked past Florida a little bit to Tennessee, who they play after Florida this week. So a lot of talk about Tennessee, like you said. That's going to be an extremely important game, a top three matchup in Athens, one of the biggest games in college football. But they still have the Gators next week. And like we've talked about, this week is about getting healthy, working on things that they need to address. But season really starts next weekend with the Gators in Jacksonville. And I think they should be ready.
Hey, Brian, it looks like they're going to be about an 18 to 20 point favorite over Florida. That's not really a common. Well, first of all, just your general thought on that number, anywhere from 18 to 20 over the Florida Gators.
I think that's pretty reasonable.
Okay.
If you ask me right now, I think they're going to win by closer to 30 points against Florida. They're just a lot better than the Gators. Florida's struggled a lot this year. I think their 4-3 record's actually better than what they probably are at their
I
core.
That is one of the
So,
best statements you've made in a long time. Florida looks
oh, okay.
bad.
I just don't think they're that great. I think the Utah win was, a little fluky. Sometimes week one things happen that aren't really indicative of the rest of the season. But they're just not a good football team. It's not an offense that's put together very well. It's a defense that's going to be gassed when they play Georgia, and they play Georgia the way they play. Their best game of the season was their loss to Tennessee. For me, I think it was better than their win over Utah, just because of what we've seen from both of those teams since then. So them hanging around with the Vols, I thought was pretty impressive. And at the time, I was like, oh, well, maybe Florida's a little better than I thought. But you watch the other games, and it's like, well, they're just not put together. That's the way I would put it.
Yeah, and we don't know what the line will be yet, but I'll tell you this: Georgia, as a favorite over the Gators, has only lost twice. That was in 2014. Excuse me, three times this century. That is again in 2003, 2014, when Jeremy Pruitt didn't understand how to call a defense. I mean, that was disgusting. And then in 2020, which was Georgia was a narrow favorite in that game. They were a 12-point favorite in 14. Georgia's 7-3 overall as a favorite in this game, just general. And the other thing, Matt, is you know those of us who are younger, Ryan does not fall in this category because I don't think he was even alive, but very well remember the 90s and that which bled into the 2000s, and Georgia just could not win this game, period. Didn't matter. I mean, they weren't favored. They were not the better team, but they couldn't win the game. It was a disaster virtually every time they played.
Yeah, that 0-2 loss, I still think, sits. Georgia fans will never get over that. But that's what made the 2004 win so big. Leonard Pope
Yes.
and Fred Gibson with those touchdowns late in the game. I mean, that was almost program changing. But they were really good the 2 years before that, just couldn't get over that Florida hump. And we see what, that game means to a lot of former players. I was talking to Marcus Howard about them running onto the field, the Trenton Sturdivant dance that everyone remembers. But they've had some crazy, wild games down there in Jacksonville. But recently, other than 2020, Georgia's, taking control, and Kirby Smart's done an excellent job handling Florida and taking over this series. Georgia owns the series record with Florida. If you think if you lived through the 90s and early 2000s, it's kind of hard to believe, but they've got the series under control right now, and they should win this game. Florida's got some building to do as a program. They're not on Georgia's level just yet. They're unranked, and we'll see how long Georgia can continue to take control of this series. But I definitely think that, like Ryan said, they could win this game by a decent amount. He said 30 points. I like that a lot, Ryan. I could easily see that as well.
You like that because you think it is possible, or?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Florida has an athletic quarterback. That's about it. They've got problems on defense. They've got problems running the football, catching the football, blocking. There's not a lot that they do well. And if Georgia comes out and plays like the number one team in the country, they should be able to win by close to 30 or at that 30 mark, like Ryan said.
All right, well, your number one option for dinner tonight is DoorDash. Let me tell you this, you can get, for a limited time, our listeners get 50% off of a $20 value or $0 in delivery fees. You all could have gotten those coffees this morning from DoorDash, but Matt just killed his off anyway. When you download the DoorDash app and enter the code DAWG, D-A-W-G, that's 50% off a $20 value, zero delivery fees. When you download the DoorDash app, we got it for you right down below. Enter the code DAWG. Don't forget the code is DAWG for 50% off of a $20 value, $0 in delivery fees with our friends from DoorDash. You can't see the screen, but I promise you I have it back there. Subject to change, terms apply. I think that, yeah, I want to just say this real quick too about DoorDash. People this week tend to eat a lot of like alligator. I do not like alligator. I think it's very not good. Matt, comments?
I like it. I like some gator
Really?
tails, some gator
It's not
balls. They're a
good.
great appetizer. No,
But
it's awesome.
it's tough. It's like very tough.
Gator bites.
Yeah.
Gator bites is a
Gator
great
bites.
appetizer. It's got to be cooked properly. It's got to be done right.
It's gamey for sure, but I like it.
I don't mind gamey. I just have never, I literally have never thought that gator was good, like food. But hey, I mean, I get it this week. Ryan, you look like you were going to say something.
No, I was gonna say yesterday I came across like a look ahead to this coming NFL draft. Who are the top 5 quarterbacks? And Anthony Richardson was ranked number 3, and I don't get it. I haven't gotten it for months. I've been saying that for a while. I don't see he's about to pull up one of the plays, which is the reason why I don't get it. But
Me?
yeah, so I just don't see it. You know, he's don't get me wrong. I mean, you know, on the ground, he can really make things happen, but the dude has more interceptions than touchdowns. And the NFL is not, look, there are 2 quarterbacks in the NFL that have their legs used properly, and that is because their coaches have schemed for it, and those guys also have talented arms. I mean, with Anthony Richardson, you don't see him step up in the pocket and make the throws necessary when they need to happen. I mean, the one throw that people can think of that he made that was, you know, oh, that was a crazy throw, was a Johnny Manziel type play against Utah in crunch time. But other than that, can you even think of, oh, wow, Anthony Richardson just made an amazing throw? You really can't.
He had a really nice throw against LSU, but I think a really nice throw is not going to work against this team. I'll run down the numbers just real quick, Ryan. And his best game was the first game, 17 to 24, no interceptions, no touchdowns. Now he ran for 106 yards in that game. Anyway, 14 to 35 against the Cats, 10 of 18 against South Florida. They nearly lost that game. Against Tennessee, he was 24 of 44, 62 yards rushing. 8 of 4 against Eastern Washington and hardly played him. 8 of 14, they scaled it back against Mizzou. He had 45 yards rushing. He's going to get rushing yards, Matt, about 50. And then against LSU, excuse me, 15 to 25, 185 yards, a touchdown, 9 runs for 109 yards, one of which was an 81-yard run. He is frightening when he gets running. I think the concern, generally speaking, is he's not hitting 60% of completion rate. There are too many turnovers. He's got multiple, it's not the end of the world. He has multiple he has multiple 2-interception games. There are only 2 games, Matt, where he has not thrown an interception. That was against Utah and LSU. He is raw. He is what I would call a project, and he is definitely uber gifted physically. I just don't. And let me add this before I throw it to you. I don't know that there's a lot around him. I mean, I like the running back a lot, but other than that, I just Florida is not super gifted right now.
No, you're right, and it goes back to what you say all the time. You got to play quarterback. He's a tremendous athlete. He can run. He can throw the ball really far, really fast. He just doesn't know where it's going. When you play quarterback, you got to know where you're throwing the ball. You got to be accurate, and he's not that. And when the completion percentage is not there, he does not take care of the football. Stares down his receivers. You said he's a project. Eventually, you got to complete the project. He's been a project for a long time now, and it doesn't look like the project is nearly finished. But he's got to have to play, the game of his life, throwing and running, if they're going to have any chance of beating Georgia. But they're going to, be ready to play. I mean, those linebackers are going to be spying him. They're not going to let him run wild on them for 100 yards. I mean, Georgia's got some linebackers who can run. Jamon Dumas-Johnson, Small Munden. And again, you got to get, those guys fully healthy. But this is a defense that knows what he can and can't do. And I think they're going to be ready for him 100%.
Ryan, the Small Munden getting healthy part is, I think, critical of what Matt just said a second ago.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a handful of guys who need to get healthy. He kind of sounds like the one that's closest to being ready to play out of kind of the three main guys that you think of as far as injured players are Smile Monson, A.D. Mitchell, and Jalen Carter. I think Smile is the closest to lacing it up again, and then A.D. Mitchell. But, I mean, Jalen Carter, if he's out there against Florida, which I am predicting that he's not going to be ready until Tennessee. But if Jalen's out there against Florida, then you're adding another element that he's got to really deal with, where in the first 2 seconds things are collapsing on you. There's an offensive lineman being pushed back in your face. That's a place where Anthony Richardson could be dangerous, but then you've got the other 11 guys that could just flat out run. I mean, that's a fast secondary that Georgia has right now. You think about, Christopher Smith, an experienced guy that always seems to be around the ball. Malachi Starks flies to the ball, can make really athletic plays. So, I mean, Anthony Richardson this season still hasn't played a defense, I don't even think, close to Georgia's. So he's made things happen against defenses that, maybe they're pretty solid. I don't think Tennessee's defense is solid. I mean, they just allowed 50 points. They allowed 30-something to Florida. I think one other team put up a good amount of points on them. So Utah's defense, is that the best defense he's played? Maybe, LSU's is not the worst in the world, but against a defense like Georgia's, you saw when he had limited snaps against Georgia last year, 2 turnovers, bad decisions. Georgia flew all around on him. They had, one of the best defensive 2 minutes of the season against him last year. So you see what happens when he faces a super talented defense that's also well coached and well prepared.
Yeah, so I'd kind of like some blind reaction here to if I told you that the best defense that Florida played this year was Kentucky, would you believe me?
Probably.
How about if I said the second best was Missouri?
And they played Georgia tough. I mean,
and that Missouri is just narrowly outside the top 20 in defense.
No, their defense was definitely not bad at all.
No, Mizzou you're talking about?
Mizzou had a solid defense.
They did. They're very good. I mean, when you look at, Georgia is permitting a little, let's just say 250 yards. Missouri is allowing 330. Kentucky is allowing 300. So this will by far be the most challenging situation that the Gators get into. I mean, Utah is 42nd in the country. Let me see where South Florida is. So South Florida is 127th in excuse me, y'all, in defense. It's just not good defense. I think Florida is going to have an abnormally difficult time with Georgia. Abnormally is maybe a bad way to put it. I don't know, but they're not prepared. They've not yet seen what's coming at them. And as it relates to the criticism of Georgia, it is almost exclusively, y'all, on the offensive side of the ball. This is sort of what happens, but I just don't. This defense is so good, and you have to play 60 minutes against the entire team. The punter has been solid. Jack Panesley has been very good to great. I mean, it depends on what you're talking about there. They've not permitted much in the way of kickoff returns. So that's special teams, but it's just hard to score against this defense, y'all. They're allowing they are the they are the lowest in the country. They've only allowed 5 touchdowns this season total. So they are Georgia is number 3 in yardage, and they are number 1 in offenses in touchdowns allowed. Them and Illinois are exceptional defenses. Ohio State and Michigan are way up there too, y'all, but they've allowed double the amount of touchdowns. Now, I'm not going to keep rambling about this, but I think this is going to be a really challenging moment for the Gators. Billy Napier on the conference call Wednesday, I mean, you can tell it's their first season. And I do want to just throw a real quick story for y'all. We were leaving Jacksonville in 16, and Georgia had lost 3 games. They had lost 3 games in a row to the Gators. And there was this old timer who was there. And Fletcher was there and Wes were there. I don't think the 2 of y'all were there, but we were leaving, and this was Kirby's first year, and this was Georgia had lost to Vandy, I think, the week before the bye, and then they went down to Florida and didn't play great. Jacob was just overwhelmed. I mean, this was a decent Florida team, and they weren't great. And they went on to win the division. And the old timer was just dejected in ways that I thought was a little, I mean, he was really down in the dumps. And he just asked us if we were, reporters or whatever. It was pretty obvious with all the bags we had. But he said, I never thought when Vince Dooley was the coach that Georgia would come down here and just get beat like this. And a year later, and I said, well, I mean, it's just Kirby's first year. There's going to take a little time to get things. A year later, not only did Georgia, that's the worst I've ever seen Georgia beat Florida. The coach was fired the next day. This was 365 days later. Georgia would go on to win the league that year, win the Rose Bowl, and play for the national championship. They followed that up with losing once to the Gators since 2017. This is a series that it looks like right now Georgia will be in control of for this year and next. I can't say after that. And maybe next year, we don't know. But Matt, things can change so quickly in college football. It looked like Florida was a stable program in 2016. By 2017, it had all fallen apart quick.
Yeah, they just haven't had quarterback play like they used to.
No.
And then I think that's a real big deal. And they still kind of don't have it because, again, there's so many question marks still with Anthony Richardson and what he can do from a passing perspective. But I think Georgia needs to shut these guys out eventually. They came pretty close a couple times back in 2017, like you mentioned. Florida scored at the very end of the game. Game had been over for an hour at least. But that's something I don't think Georgia's ever done, at least in Jacksonville, shut out the Gators. So if there's one thing that, this team might have on the wall, it's, hey, let's go shut these guys out. This is a year where we might have the ability to do so and just continue to pound them in the face. This is Georgia's #1 rival. So even though they're unranked and Georgia's #1, this still is a massive, massive game and one that you can't lose, and one where I think Georgia fans, are coming into Jacksonville expecting Georgia to just beat them down. And anytime you can beat down the Florida Gators when they're in the state of a program the way they are, it's always important to do that. And Kirby doesn't like Florida. Again, he's a Georgia guy. He doesn't like Auburn. He doesn't like Georgia Tech. He gets it. He gets it just like the fans do. So I expect him to come out hot. I think the bye week before Florida is always important. They have the same before Georgia as well. But you want to come out clicking, playing well, and prove to everyone that you are the #1 team in the country and, kind of put Florida back in their place a little bit.
What do you think, Ryan?
I mean, they have a hold on the series right now. I mean, and they've been the better team for the last decade for the most part in that series. But since Kirby's come along, I give first-year coaches kind of a cop out. Okay, you got to get your program right. Not a lot of first year programs do so well. USC right now is over exceeding what they should be doing, in my opinion, just generally speaking. But they're also in the Pac-12, and so they go in there, they lose. It's not pretty, but they've, outside of 2020, which was also just kind of a crapshoot of a year, and for Georgia on offense, it was a crapshoot of the year with all the quarterback issues. I mean, it was that 2020 was the worst quarterback year for Georgia, just because you didn't know who it was going to be week to week, really, and so they just dominated. The games haven't been close. And whether the scoreboard says it or not, you can feel it in the stadium. Georgia just has a hold in the game. I mean, Georgia didn't blow them out of the park last year, but they had a complete stranglehold on the game for almost the entire time. And this is Billy Napier's first year. He's got to deal with the fact that Georgia's way more talented than Florida. It's not really close. They just don't have some of the athletes that Georgia has and the depth of athletes that they do. So they're just not super close to each other right now. And I've been saying that about a lot of teams, but especially in the SEC East, there's just not a lot of programs that are even close to where Georgia's at.
No, I mean, again, make sure you're picking up DAWGSTRUCTION. If you email me, you get a shirt included as well. But you need to tell me what size you are. If you don't email me, you're just going to get the book, which is fine. You can pick that up today. I mean, the link is down below. So just a very quick review, because we're essentially going to talk about Florida 2 straight weeks in a row, which is fine with me. In 10, you saw Florida has not been relevant nationally since 2009. Okay. And in terms of the possibility of winning the national championship, I would say maybe in 2020 they were relevant nationally. Is that about right, Matt?
I mean, they won the East. They were playing good football at times. I think they still lost 3 or 4 games that year, but Kyle Trask was really good. Kyle Pitts was really good. So they were relevant from that perspective.
In 10, they lost in overtime to Georgia lost in overtime to the Gators. That was Urban Meyer's final game against Georgia. A season later, Georgia saved itself late with Richard Samuel running into the end zone 24 to 20. 12 was one of the all-time classic matchup between these two teams. Georgia coming out on top of her Will Muschamp and company. Will Greer, not Will Greer. Was it Will Greer? I can't remember the guy's name.
I don't think so.
Jeff. That was wrong. Jeff
Driscoll.
Jeff Driscoll. Okay, 13. Georgia was putting it on Florida, and Florida came back. That was a tighter game than it should have been. 14 was one of the all-time upsets in the game. It was just a disaster. The defense couldn't stop. I mean, Florida ran the ball. Excuse me, Florida threw the ball 6 times. It's 6 times too many. Jeremy Pruitt proving that he just was not capable of winning a big game as a defensive coordinator. 15 was, a deserved victory for Florida. They were clearly the better team. Georgia was starting Fatone Balto, which should have never happened. It was a total disaster. As bad as Jeremy Pruitt was, Brian Schottenheimer might have been worse, which is saying something. Then you had 16 with Kirby's first group. Florida wins the East. Not a great Florida team. 17, total destruction. Florida had zero interest in being there. 18 was halfway a fight. I mean, Florida had the lead in the third quarter, and then Georgia just zipped right past them. 19 was I would say a classic Georgia-Florida. Yeah. Georgia had to fight that way at the end. They were up 17-3 and had to win it 24 to 24.
They survived that one.
They did survive it with Lewis Cager. Jake Fromm really did play well against Florida. You would like him to play well on first and second down too, but he really played well on third down. And 20, that game Georgia got out on Florida. Zamir White with that big 75-yard run. But in all that time, and then of course last year with the defensive surge at the half, Georgia's been the better program, Matt. And that's with Florida winning the East 3 times. So I just these two programs are always going to be at worst top 15 programs in the country. Really, they are top 10 programs. And it is one of the classic games in American sport. But for Georgia, there are only so many years where you can really throttle your rival. And I think this is one of those years. When you are somewhere around a 20-point favorite, Matt, it suggests The variance in that is, you could lose. You could also win by 40.
Yeah, I mean, if Napier's not the guy, we could see kind of a Georgia Auburn thing going on where Georgia just kind of does it every year to him and takes,
Do you
off
think
with
he's
this
the guy?
series.
Can you tell?
I can't tell just yet. I think he could be,
I'll
but I
let you off
didn't
the
think
hook there.
Heupel was going to be the guy there at Tennessee
Yeah,
either. It proves that he is the guy. So we'll give Billy a little bit more time, but tough year, first year so far.
yeah, but man, you remember this. We came out of Knoxville last year saying, okay,
This guy
they
knows what
have
he's doing.
this guy knows what he's doing. Yeah, we did not feel that way with Jeremy at any point when he was in Knoxville. But Ryan, your comments on all of that?
Yeah, it's too early. Even if Florida lost most of the rest of their games, I think it would be too early. I think you can't really, the problem, because you want immediate success, you want immediate gratification, is that they're going to turn around super fast, and there's not really that many guys that can do that. Heupel turning around Tennessee in that way, which I think Tennessee will have a huge drop off next year. But being
Well,
able to do that is not common. Doing what Kirby did in year 2 is not common. I mean, they were 3 points away from winning the national championship. They were 1 play away from winning the national championship. So for
it's not
Napier, you
common.
got to give him
Common, but
more time.
you can do it. I mean, at Florida, Georgia, LSU, you can turn things around in 2 years.
Well, he's got to recruit really well. He's got to get
And he's
the
not
right
doing that.
people in place,
That's
and
the
they're not
problem, right,
doing that.
Matt?
And that was the problem before with Mullen.
Isn't that the problem? Is that still the problem, Matt?
It's getting better, and they closed last year's class well. But overall, if we're talking top to bottom classes, it's not like what Georgia's bringing in or Alabama or anything like that. They're very top heavy, with a couple 5 stars, a couple high 4 stars. But after that, it's a long list of average to mid 3-star guys. And when they start turning these classes of 25, close to 30 players, and where they're all really good players, that's when they'll start competing for the East again and competing with Georgia. But just a few 5 and 4 stars in each class is not going to get it done. They have to have more depth in these classes, I think. And the current cycle, they're getting some guys, but overall, it's just not top to bottom where it should be and where it needs to be. I mean, when Urban was recruiting, they were bringing in some of the top classes in the country. Yeah. Right now, it's not even close to that. Maybe it gets that way, but there's a long way to go there.
It's not complicated, and you have to do the recruiting. And if you don't,
they're not the fun, cool school that they were back in the day. It's not, as cool to go to Florida as it was, in the late 2010s right now. So, I mean, and they've got Georgia winning is not going to be easy for them. They have to come into the Peach State to get talent. Other programs, Tennessee emerging is not good for Florida either, but eventually they'll get it together, but it might take a little bit.
Tennessee, well, what creates fun is winning. And, I think Athens is always going to be fun. Gainesville's not quite the same way as Georgia in that front, but I do think that this is a great opportunity for Georgia to really get better. I guess get some guys healthy, although I'm not sure about that part, but really just get better and get where they want to go, which is, Atlanta and beyond. And the Florida Gators are in their way. All right, we're going to wrap it up. Ryan, what do you have this weekend?
Oh, I'm open. I'm not going to the rodeo. I'm going to tell you that right now, which is Friday night.
What?
There's a big rodeo concert, which I will not be at.
Oh,
Matt, will you be at the rodeo?
I will not be at any rodeos. Not my thing. Not real overalls and straw hat type of guy. Not a country music guy. So
you don't like country music. You don't like dirt roads and dogs and someone took your girlfriend.
Tractors and hay in your mouth. It's not my thing. No.
Those are the extremes.
Okay. I don't really know what else to say about that. That was aggressive from Matthew. But hey, we're here to compete, right? Hey, thanks for watching. Yeah. We'll see you this coming week as the Dogs get ready for the Gators.